Welcome back, everyone, to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club where each week we sit back and brew good conversation and play games together. I'm your host, Jenny Wyndham.
And I'm Joel Thomas.
And we are back. After a week off, we are ready to talk all about Gris. I have to say, I have been going back and forth because I had someone actually in a different stream I was hanging out with in Intelligame. Someone was like, "Oh, but the developers here on this like Steam forum post say that you can pronounce it as Grease," and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And it's driving me up the wall. I will admit, because I went back to the developer talk and I was like, did I mishear? And he very clearly says it as Gris. And so I'm just like,
We
say it
just
how you
maybe
say it.
take a postmodern approach to it, like just as long as it's understandable within the linguistic community that you're a part of, you're
Exactly.
good.
You all know what we're talking about, but also I just wanted to address it because if it's driving you up the wall where you're like, it's supposed to be Grease every time, know that that is correct. And maybe we're also correct. I don't know. It's a world of accents and all of that good stuff. So just know over the last couple of weeks, that is what I've been going through different videos. And then what's funny is there's a behind the scenes with the developers, and one of the people who's like the interviewer also says it in a whole different way. So I'm just like, you know, we're not going to stress out of all the things in the world, we're not going to stress too much about that.
Yeah, one person called it gross, and I was like, that's a bridge too far.
Well,
That
that's
is unacceptable.
definitely incorrect.
I'm making that up. That did not happen. Yes, agreed. We're doing our best here, folks, and more than anything, we got a beautiful game. We got a beautiful game to discuss, and we're really excited to be chatting about it with you all for the month of March.
Yeah, so again, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. If this is your, I don't know, how many games have we played? If this is your what, probably
60th time?
60th? 16th, maybe.
I mean, I was thinking like 60th episode, but yeah, I don't
Oh,
really
I was
know.
thinking in terms of games, but yeah, if
That's
it's your
good.
60th episode, I think we're probably in the 60s actually. Welcome. We always every week like to kick off with a little bit of a sampler called the pastry case. It's where we go over indie game and just general game news, topics that we are interested in, topics that we feel like it's important to talk about, what we've been playing and consuming outside of our monthly brew, and then the second half of the podcast is always a deeper dive into the section of the game that we've been playing together. As a heads up, because this month has been a little bit wonky, we have just 2 episodes for this month's game. So the first episode was really just the prologue and a lot of our initial thoughts going in. Today, in the second half, we are going to be going through the entire rest of the game. So this is going to be a heftier, just sort of content heavy episode. Just wanted to let you all know ahead of time. But topic of the show.
But
Huh?
topic of the show.
Yes. So today's topic of the show is a heavy one, I will say, but it's one of those that I felt like would be really important to talk about because not everyone is perpetually online or on Twitter. And I think this is one of the things that if you're not online, you may not know this is happening, but it
Mm.
is something that I think everyone should be aware of, just because it's happening. I guess should I kick off
Yeah,
those?
absolutely.
Okay, let me bring up the article itself because do, 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 do. Basically earlier, gosh, where to even start with this? Earlier this week, I will say, Alyssa, is it Mercant? Apologies, I don't know. I've just read Alyssa's name. I've not pronounced it out loud before, heard it pronounced. But Alyssa, a reporter for Kotaku, recently published an article called "Sweet Baby Doesn't Do What You Think It Does," and it's kicked off a very big wave of online hate and harassment. Um, I do want to note, actually, we'll be linking in the show notes. If any of this stuff is hitting home particularly, we'll link some resources so that you can look up just some mental health resources to take care of yourself, but also if you want to look up resources to take care of yourself online, look at different types of internet security. We'll put some links in the description too. But this article, so Sweet Baby is a company. It's like a narrative development writing consultative company. And they've actually been the subject of internet conversations and some vitriol over the last few years. Recently, a Steam curator group was created, essentially, to their words, saying so people could make a quote informed decision whether or not they wanted to purchase a game that Sweet Baby was involved in. This is very insidiously and carefully worded because it's not openly hateful, but the thing that they are trying to allow people to make, again, quote, informed decisions about is essentially diversity and representation in video games, the presence of what they would call like woke, I don't know,
Yeah,
content.
yeah, exactly. What during Gamergate was the SJW, like
Yeah.
it's the same, like we want to not ever not feel centered in our gaming experience. And
Hmm.
so we want to be able to make people feel informed about whether or not they're going to be centered in that experience. And if
Right.
there's even the possibility of authentic voices from anyone that is not me.
Right. And again, one of the things that I think Alyssa does a great job of highlighting is while sensitivity readings is something that Sweet Baby Inc. does, because they have a team that is positioned and able to make those recommendations for sensitivity readings, that is not their sole purpose. In the industry, they are actually doing other consultative work like writing NPC dialogue. They do script read throughs, so sensitivity checks is just an element of what they do. But according to this group, that is not the sole reason for their being here, is to create and sort of propagate this agenda.
Mhm.
Um, what happened is I believe someone at Sweet Baby, but someone noticed this Steam curator group. And they essentially said, hey, Steam has some terms of service against hateful content policies. Like, why is this group allowed to exist? Why is it not taken down?
Mhm.
Because of this inquiry, that group became sort of more inflamed. They got bigger. They've made a Discord and even bigger hub. And this has actually grown to the point where even the other day I saw Elon Musk tweeting about it. So it's really taken on an extra life of its own.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
and yeah, it's really not surprising to see, but it is really sort of appalling to see that this is happening again because
Mhm.
what you may see or hear in the news is people calling this Gamergate 2.0. Gamergate happened about 10, almost exactly 10 years ago, where under the guise of ethics in games journalism, certain groups used it as an excuse to try and push people they didn't believe belong in games out of the industry. And so this is just another iteration and extension of that happening, which is why you may hear again people calling it the 2.0 version.
Yeah, and it's strange. Jenny shared a couple really helpful articles related to some of this that kind of got me up to speed. I am terminally online, and I hadn't heard anything about this. And it was one of the things that was fascinating. It was a kind of 10-year Gamergate retrospective. Was how the Gamergate experience really set a mold for.
Hmm.
I it's framed as culture war, but I don't really like that term. That like the Trump campaign leveraged to
Hmm.
propagate themselves and move forward in 2016. And I hadn't really thought about it like that, but yeah, like the playbook, we have been seeing it over and over and over again. We just coming
Hmm.
out of our most recent version of this with like book banning and things like that, where it's like anytime something doesn't directly align with a particular demographic, and like, to be clear, in the states at least, it is like a white Christian nationalist focused often, uh typically male subgroup of people that are like, well, if it's not exactly how I see the world, then it needs to be taken down a peg and
Mm,
it's inherently wrong. And yeah, so it was really, it was really sad, to be honest, to see how this is unfolding again. And I gotta like also kind of speak on this from like a business perspective. Like I work as a product manager, and so much of my job is making sure that, as like you all know how critical I am of like the capitalistic mindset, but like my job is to make sure that the products I'm making are going to be purchased by as many people as possible. Like that's the profit motive behind all of this. And it's like, just from a basic profit perspective, it makes sense that you would want to make sure that the thing you're building is going to be accepted by a wide audience. And having organizations like Sweet Baby Inc. that can come in and help make sure that like specific elements are, whether it's dialogue or if it's anything else,
mhm,
are going to appeal to the people that are being represented in those moments, if it's dialogue or whatever else.
mhm,
uh, it is from a profit perspective something that you would want to do. So like I really, like, there is no motivation for this type of vitriol outside of just hatred. Like that to me is the
mhm.
only rational, not, and it's not even like rational, it's the only explanation that I can really wrap my head around. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's something I've been kind of reflecting on since you shared this with me, Jenny.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and just to maybe also clarify some of that process, because I think what's tough in this is that I feel very mixed and about almost speaking to the people who are most adamantly saying a lot of these sort of conspiracy theories, because they're the folks who are coming in
Hmm.
in bad faith into the conversation.
Yeah,
It's like
totally.
I don't know if I'm going to try to change their minds, and if I did, I don't know
Oh,
if that would
sure.
be successful. But I think for people who are maybe coming in and uncertain or like wondering
Hmm.
what is going on, just to clarify how this works, when and it may be similar and maybe different from your product realm, but in games, the consultative process usually happens, for better or worse, later in product development and game development. And so when a
Hmm.
contractor, because Sweet Baby Inc. is essentially a group of contractors. When these contractors are brought in, they are not really doing much more than making recommendations based on their experience. And so, with one of the games that really is sort of being talked about a lot during this is Alan Wake 2, because that's a recent game that they worked on. Alan Wake 2 has a Black woman as the protagonist. And so it makes sense for Sweet Baby Inc. to come in and do this type of sensitivity check, because the devs from Alan Wake, I think, are from Finland. And so they need someone who knows the tone, because they know that they don't know how to write that kind of voice. Um, but even with that, they are being Sweet Baby Inc. are being hired by the developers. And so the developers at the end of the day can take what they want and they can leave out what they want. And so I think this one of the arguments of Sweet Baby and other groups like Sweet Baby forcing diversity
Mm.
is just simply not true,
It's just not
because
true.
they don't have, like, in that power relationship, they don't have the power to force, because they are contractors. And as to your point, um, these developers are hiring them because diversity is happening already, and they're trying to be representative, they're trying to be accurate and authentic. So yeah.
You know what's funny? I was thinking about like butterfly effect type things. I've been thinking a lot about
Mhm.
that lately. And one of the things that I was thinking about was the decision in the late 80s to intentionally market video game systems to boys.
Mhm.
And the thing behind that being like, well, it's going to be sold in toy stores, and toy stores were gendered, and so we needed to know, are we putting these in the boys aisle or the girls aisle? They chose the boys aisle, and like it feels like a decision that was made in another era, and the ripples of that we are
Mhm.
have become like a typhoon or a tidal wave that we are now dealing with.
Yeah.
And it's like such a silly reason. Like it's hard because, like, in like in the States today, you can buy video game systems pretty much anywhere. You buy them at the grocery store, and like, so it's not really a thing. But like back then, you couldn't buy them everywhere. They were sold at specific places, and they were considered toys. And that's how the toy store world worked back in the day. Like it's just changed so much, but it set that precedent so early on that, well,
Hmm.
video games are a boy thing. And man, I just can't get over, or I can't stop wondering how much of the stuff that we are seeing today is a result of that decision from back way back when. Obviously, like, I'm not saying that because I want to exculpate the people that are being hateful today. Like, most of them were not alive back then, but it's just like one of those, like, are they maybe even subconsciously reacting to this kind of history, this gendered history of video game systems from, at this point, almost 50 years ago.
Yeah, I think that could be a part of it. I feel like you were saying earlier though,
Hmm.
there's a deeper systemic sort of hatred that is going on here
Yep.
that goes beyond just like video games are for guys, not for girls. I think there's absolutely like a racial component to this in addition to a
Totally.
sexism
Yep. Yep.
element. So, yeah, I think it's a whole bevy of things. Um and in talking about this, I just want to let folks know that, part of what they want is for people to leave, right? Part of what they
Hmm.
want is to reclaim a space, or not even reclaim, to claim a space as their own, and not allow anyone in. And so, um, do so at your comfort level and for your safety level, because this
Hmm.
is quite serious. But they want people to stop talking about it. They want people to leave. They want people to hide and to kind of like hope they go away. And so I think as you are online and in spaces where maybe this is occurring, please just like be aware. I would love to encourage you all, again, in your own way and keeping your own safety in mind, to not let them take up that space and to conversely
Hmm.
take up space in your own way. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So this is a heavy one. We won't spend too much more time on this just because it's also continuing to develop. We'll keep you all posted on if anything else happens or if, as it evolves. Again, the most recent thing that I noticed was it's not going to be quieting down anytime soon, simply
Mhm.
because I saw it got into Elon's Twitter, and that means I think we're probably just seeing the beginnings of this. We're also in an election year in the US, so that's got to add another whole level of like intensity to any of these conversations, I would imagine. Um, so yeah, I would just say keep yourself safe as much as possible, but also take up as much space as possible.
Yeah, I want to just like call out the importance of intersectionality with all the work
Hmm.
that we're trying to do here, because this is just one front that we're seeing this. Obviously, all this is happening as the genocide in Gaza is raging on,
Yep.
as we have people calling for the positives of colonization and colonialization. We have people calling for the positives of Christian nationalism, which obviously is like the founding roots of the Nazi Party. Like, there, we are going to be seeing this just get more and more hate, and I think and more fuel, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. And I just want to call out that, like, having opportunities to connect, like, with even within this community, with people that are all just like very different and have different interests and different, ways of like engaging with the
Mm.
world, that are trying to even just talk about a game for one game a month. Like, it's just such an important opportunity to build some community where we have it, because I think that that's what's keeping me sane right now. And I want to say I appreciate y'all. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I'm just echoing that. I think one of the things that I have come back to time and time again is the power of community, the power of direct action, of mutual aid, of just like finding other people who also are wanting to put good into the world and to
Hmm.
want to improve and do better. And so, yeah, to echo Joel's sentiment, whether or not you are just listening in, you participate in the Discord, however else you get involved in this community, you're all truly appreciated. Definitely bolster my my mental state in a lot of ways. So
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
Um,
Speaking of our mental state, what are some things
yes.
that we have been doing over the last couple weeks? Things that have been exciting, things that have been joy giving?
um, well, to no one's surprise, one thing that has been giving me a lot of joy and allowing me to at least get some mental space to just not be stressed all the time is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I am continuing my playthrough. For anyone else who's playing it or maybe interested in where I'm at, I am. I think I'm. It says I'm 33% through chapter 11. So for folks who are playing, you'll probably know about where that is in terms of the story. There are a lot of things that have happened. Joel's laughing because he knows exactly how many hours I've spent.
I'm laughing because I know how many hours you've played, and you said 33%, and I was like, if you're only
No,
33% of the way through this game and you've been playing for this many hours, I am sunk. I am dead in the water.
no,
So
not through
I
the game,
okay.
just through chapter 11. So I'm feeling like where I know the developers have said the game will pretty much end based on where I'm at. I've got to be getting relatively close.
Mm,
Um, I am still loving this experience. There's a lot that I don't understand, but I'm just here for the ride. I'm so happy. There are certain chapters that I guess, for the lack of a more accurate specific word, because I don't want to spoil, I guess they're sort of like parallel storylines happening, and
mhm.
it's just the ability to be in this world, enjoy it fully, like in an open world format, and theory craft has been a joy. So yeah, that's been carrying me the last couple weeks.
I did see that in the last couple, maybe I don't know how recently this was, but it was somewhat recently that they have recanonized Final Fantasy VII Advent's Children, the movie that came out a while ago. It for a long time it was considered not canon, and then when this new game came out, they have like recanonized it.
Interesting. I saw Advent Children in the theaters way back when it came out. Or was it in the I forget. I saw it when it came out. I have not
Mhm.
seen it since, so I should probably rewatch it once I'm done because that's very
There are some
interesting.
killer scenes in that. I maybe we should do that like after I finish as well. Rebirth is to hop in and watch Advent Children and see if we can figure out what's going on.
Mhm.
Because there's some levels to this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. And then I've been dabbling in a couple of other more indie titles, just to kind of, change up the palette a little bit. I've been playing
Hmm.
Summerhouse, which is this wonderful toy box of a game where all you're given is just a bunch of different assets, and you're just the only thing you're told to do is just to create and to build little houses or big houses, whatever you want, build structures. It's very Mediterranean feeling, and you can change different weather scenes. The weather changes. You have 4 different scenes you can pick from, and as you create, different assets will pop back in, and different actions and people will start to populate this world that you're
Hmm.
you're making. Um, I will say at first it was a little bit challenging because you have to get into the creative mindset. Like, you have to be willing to experiment and to play and to like just trust in that process. And as someone who is very type A, like, just tell me what to do, I will achieve it. I will overachieve it if you give me the bar. Having that open, like, enjoy, just be free, that feeling almost feels more intimidating to me. So there was a
Mm.
little bit of that learning curve, but it was so much fun. That first time I played, I've been dabbling in it a little bit more, and I will probably continue playing it and just wanting to unlock as many assets as I can. Then I've been playing just a little bit. I'm probably just like an hour in. Snufkin, Melody of Moon Valley, really sweet, really lovely. It's funny, I was talking with in another podcast that I'm on, and they were just like, Snufkin is like an ACAB game. And it kind of is, like, in its own
Oh
gentle
shit.
children's story way, because you're basically like going against this like park ranger cop in the game. So I'm like, hey, Moomins say a cab. That's been very endearing to me. And so I'm excited to
Wow.
play more of the game, see how it turns out. But
I
yeah, what
think you
about you?
just made me a Moomin person
Yeah,
after all these years.
right. But what have
Oh.
you been enjoying?
Yeah, tough time. So I've been looking for a little light thing, and
Mm-hmm.
I picked up Balatro and
Oh snap.
got into it, guys. Coming off of our conversation from the last podcast, I'm great at gambling now. No, I'm not.
They were right.
They were right.
This
It
needs
was
to be
teaching me to gamble
banned.
all along. No, I totally hear what you're saying. It is addicting in terms of like they've figured out the like reward system
Mm-hmm.
really, really well. Like I was thinking about when I first started playing, it's like, oh, your first, small hand or like small blind hand or whatever comes through and you get to claim a $3 reward. And I was like, $3 reward? That's stupid. Why is the number so low? It should be like $100.
Yeah.
I can't even buy a 20-ounce Mountain Dew with that. I don't know if you can or not. In any case,
Probably not
probably
anymore.
not. I was playing it and I was like, this is so silly. And then you go through the training and they teach you how you can like buy these fun little like action cards, like the Joker
Mm-hmm.
cards that give you fun little powers and multipliers and things. And I was like, give me that $3. Give me that $5. This is amazing. Like they've just somehow really captured the kind of risk reward in the game really well, in a game where there's no like it's a video game, like, and it's not like a pay for video game thing, right? Like, so
No.
there's no financial loss to you as a human being if you lose. But it's like, oh, but I had this great run going and all these jokers giving me all these great multipliers and I thought I was going to be great. And so I gotta just say, like, you did such a good job talking about this game over the last couple months, and it is just a tremendous amount of fun. So I'm gonna just plus one everything you've been saying all along, as usual. Uh, Truly enjoying Balatro. Would recommend.
Yay. Yeah, it's really interesting because normally I very rarely get into games that don't have some sort of underlying story or thread. And so
Hmm.
when I played Balatro and I found out, because I thought, which have you played Inception? Is that what it's called? Inscription. Have you played Inscription?
No, I haven't.
Oh, y'all, we might have to make Inscription one of our games in the future. So playing Inscription, I was like, I thought Balatro was going to be a bit more like that, and because Inscription has like a story kind of underlying the card game mechanic. When it didn't have that, I was like, oh, am I going to stick with this? Am I going to play more
Mhm.
Balatro? Yes. It's one of those where now that I've played it a bunch, kind of like Suika game, actually, the
Mhm.
watermelon game, I'm
Mhm.
not in it as long, but I'm definitely coming back to it very regularly because it's so easy for my brain to be like, you know what? Let's just do a run. Let's just one run. What's the harm? Um, so
I
that's been
gotta ask.
fun.
I gotta ask you a question. Just again, like dummy Joel doesn't understand how this game works in a really foundational way. So I was playing through and accidentally hit the discard button, or actually hit the play button instead of the discard button, which totally ruined my
Oh
hand. Like,
no.
whatever. Um, and so the run restarts. And
Hmm.
I think you had described this as like a roguelike where, you finish a run and then you kind of start from the base again, but you should be like that much better for it or something along those lines. And what I'm trying to understand is like, what do you carry over with you once you like die, once your run ends and you restart your next run? Like, what about you or your hands or your care, like what changes so that you actually are like leveling up as you go?
So I guess so the difference between a rogue like and a rogue light, this is a rogue like where you do not have the carryover. So like maybe your personal knowledge is the only thing that truly
Don't
carries
hit the
over.
play button when you mean to hit discard. That's
Yeah.
the thing that I
So
learned.
that is one thing. Yeah, a rogue, and again, like there are probably people who are like, actually, but really
Yeah.
the main difference that I always go by with rogue like versus roguelite is roguelike are runs that completely reset when you start back up. Um, I think you unlock like progression in the sense of you unlock different modes in Balatro or different,
Oh, interesting.
you have different things that you can unlock in terms of types of runs that you could do, but you don't unlock like levels. Whereas,
Mm.
let's see, like Hades is more of a rogue light because you unlock the different weapons and you can also upgrade, and there's a bit you can do with your stats to try and like improve your chances
Yeah.
before the run.
I've never understood that before. What a great description. Huh.
I think it's generally accurate. I'm sure there's much more nuance, but honestly, in my time in games I haven't found I needed more than that. So, that's all you
Let's
need to
make
know.
I think that's like let's all adopt the Jenny Wyndham definition for the Geeks and Grounds community. And if anyone ever asks you, just be like, well, courtesy of
Actually.
the Jenny.
Someone out there who's a very diehard fan of roguelikes and or roguelites is probably dying inside, but that's okay. Um,
You've fallen into one of the greatest blunders of our age.
anything else that you've been enjoying this week, or pretty much have you dug into Final Fantasy Rebirth at all?
Not any more than the last time we talked. I don't
Okay.
think I've definitely put in a good amount of hours. But I am just getting past, just finishing up the cave system. So
Mm-hmm,
without
mm-hmm.
spoiling anything, just getting out of the cave system. Um, really enjoying it. I'm finding it to be a really addicting game, maybe more so than any other. Um, I play a lot of RPGs, like my favorite genre, and I have been more addicted to this than I felt to other RPGs in a very long time. So very, very much
Nice.
enjoying it.
Nice. And for folks who are maybe into looking for a new notable release this week, we always like to close out the pastry case, just letting you know some of the games that are coming out. This isn't kind of a wonky one since we're covering a couple of weeks because of our slightly modified March schedule. High Water is out March 14th on PC and PlayStation 5. High Water is awesome. If you have not tried it, definitely take a look. I think they did have a demo. It doesn't look like they do now. If any of you have played Golf Club Wasteland, it's by the same team and in the same universe as that game. And this is sort of an isometric, turn based puzzle tactical game where you are in this dystopic world. There's been a climate catastrophe. La la la. That sounds so unfamiliar, right? And Earth has become pretty much untenable for human life. All the rich people are migrating out into space, and you are trying to, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, gather your friends and find a way to also go into space and escape the Earth. Um, Really great game. I'm excited to play the full thing because I guess I've only played the demo. The demo was outstanding. But yeah, High Water, March 14th. Lightyear Frontier, which is what I've been very much looking forward to, is coming out on March 19th on PC and Xbox Series X. This one, Joel, is farming but with mechs. Um,
That's right. Yeah, I
that's the
remember us
one.
watching the previews of that. That looked really, really interesting. That comes out this week.
Yes, it does.
Interesting.
March 19th it's a farming day on March 19th because Stardew Valley, while it's not a new release, they have a patch coming in, patch 1.6. This is a big one. So if you're a Stardew Valley fan, you probably already know that this is happening, but just in case you're much more casual of a player but still of the game, 1.6 is like a new festival, a new major festival, two mini festivals, more late game content, some Joja alternatives to end game quests,
Mm.
hundreds plus new lines of dialogue, like support for 8-player multiplayer on PC, new farm types, new items, like huge update. Honestly, I don't know what they're doing. Just there's so much content in Stardew Valley. It's flabbergasting, honestly.
How okay, I have not played Stardew,
Mhm.
and I understand I get told that there's a redheaded character. I think his name is Elliot or something like that. Does this sounding familiar at
I
all?
think Elliot
Um,
has no, wait, I'm thinking of Shane. Elliot, who's Elliot?
I,
Are you thinking, oh, is Elliot the doctor? Oh my gosh, it's been a minute since I've played. And I should know, but it's like one of those things where all of a sudden someone asks you a basic question that you know, and you're just like, I have no idea. Stardew characters. Like a
Okay, Elliot has a
redheaded
long coif of hair.
Elliot
Um,
Beachman. Yes, he's Beast from Beauty and the Beast. He's human
that
Beast.
so what is the like how romancy can you get in this game? Like, is this something where it's like if I were to like show up to a con dressed as a Stardew Valley character,
Oh my
like
god. You would
people
be
would be like,
yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
interesting,
people would
interesting.
definitely. Are you thinking of cosplaying as Elliot?
No, 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 nothing like that. Nothing like that. No, 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 no. I already have my next cosplay picked out. I think I'm gonna do Choso from Jujutsu Kaisen at the next Comic Con.
Oh,
So
nice.
I got to get my smoky eye game up. I got to figure out
Mhm.
how to do a smoky eye and then execute. So I don't know how that's gonna go, but we're gonna try it.
Very excited. That's gonna be so cool. So yeah, that's Stardew Valley coming out March 19th, the big patch. I'm a consummate farm starter and restarter, so I will be restarting my farm then. It's gonna be great. And the last notable launch that we wanted to highlight is Pepper Grinder, which we played the demo for Steam Next
Mm-hmm.
Fest,
Mm-hmm.
coming out on Switch and PC on the 28th. And that's going to be a real fun one. I loved the demo. We talked
Yeah,
about how good the
same.
movement was. So I'm excited to dive into that one quite
You know what's
more
funny?
literally.
As we were playing the end game of Gris,
Hmm.
I got a lot of Pepper Grinder feels. Specifically wrote that down as something that I was noticing. Like, oh, the movement in this part reminds me a lot of the movement in Pepper Grinder in this particular section. So
Yeah.
excited. I didn't realize that. Excited to dig in and talk a bit about it.
Yeah. All right, so that's it for this week's pastry case. As always, we welcome any questions or comments on anything. Just send an email to jenny@geeksandgrounds.com and we will get back to you. All right, this one's for you. Hefty. We got a lot that we need to cover because we also have a hard stop. So we're going to be getting through the remainder of Gris, this game that we have been playing. We're going to be starting essentially very close to the beginning of the game. We're going to start at Red, the stage Red, which, if you get the Steam achievement, you'll see that it's called Anger. Yeah. So I guess, Joel, would you like to set the scene? You're as the
Yeah,
resident expert on this game.
resident enthusiast, I will accept. Resident enthusiast. There was something I learned about Grace, a big something I learned about Grace last night that I did not know. That is like end game. So we'll
Oh.
talk about it. But an expert would have already known. I am certain. I think red is really really cool because it sets up your what the experience is going to be like really for the whole rest of the game.
Mhm.
You find yourself navigating. You leave kind of this opening space where everything's just grayscale. You find yourself at the in the bottom of this desert basin where the whole like all the sand and everything is red. This really intense pipe organ comes up and wind starts pushing you back so that your character actually can't progress. And you unlock your first character skill where you can kind of turn this very like pencil thin, like femme shaped character, and you turn yourself into a solid square block. And that
Mhm.
lets you not get tossed about by the wind. And you learn how to platform while leveraging the block thing and not falling off.
Yeah.
And that's really going to be the pattern that we follow through all the rest of this. Every time you unlock a new color, almost every time, you're going to go to a new environment that feels incredible. And we'll talk a lot about that. You unlock kind of a new character skill that is going to help you succeed in a given area. And then you move on. And if you do it right, not do it right, but if you decide to invest yourself into getting all your achievements and finding some of the
Mhm.
statues that represent the five stages of grief, you get some additional kind of narrative points to this story.
Mhm.
So I just got to say, the thing that I, I will never forget the first time I played Gris and got to the red section and the feeling of the pipe organ's
Mm.
volume starting completely soundless and then swelling and swelling to the point that, and the wind building at the same time to the point that your character is getting knocked back, felt like such a great uh, description of how anger can feel. It made my stomach clench, like the organ made my stomach clench. I'm very like sensitive to like the music and games.
Mhm.
And I think for me, the whole rest of this game could have been terrible, which I don't think it is, but it could have been, and I still would have remembered this opening red area as being just like really impactful. So,
Mhm.
yeah, what were your thoughts and experiences playing through it?
One of the things I wanted to highlight, because a personal favorite game of mine is Journey by that game
Mhm,
company. And I will say the descent into this stage and the descent into anger
mhm,
is very much drawing from one of the most iconic or more iconic scenes in Journey when you're
mhm,
like skating on the sand.
mhm.
And it happened just as we were sort of playing this. The developer from uh Gris was saying, like, in a Twitter post, they were talking about how like that moment was inspired by Journey specifically. And so
Oh,
it's not just me being like, oh, it really reminds me of the game. It's no, they were paying an homage to that title in that moment. So I thought that was a really cool, just like indie game, like little hey buddies shout out. Um, I felt the very same way about the organ, the pipe organ that came in, and the winds, and the sort of this cacophony of
mm,
sound that just like smacks you. um, it is it's visceral. And the first time I played, I also had this really like deep stomach clench in that moment every time it happened. And
mhm,
I loved it, but at the same time, the whole time in that area, especially we were getting buffeted by the wind, I was like, I want to get out of this place because I don't like this. Like, this is kind of uncomfortable for me to play. And I thought that was so powerful, even in my sort of dislike of that area and how
mhm.
uncomfortable it made me feel. I could appreciate that that was because it was very impactful and well done in how they're trying to portray this very visceral feeling in a typically not as visceral medium that we experience.
Can I just say, I'm so glad that you said that because I was reflecting on this last night as we were prepping for this. And the next stage that you get to, which I believe is the green stage, and things are
Mhm.
very like floral and, just absolutely stunning. With the exception of the green stage, I had that feeling of discomfort with every stage of this game. Like in the red stage, I was so frustrated because I was like, oh, I just want to be able to walk and not get pushed back by the wind. And then later, it was like, oh, I just want to be able to like float to the next platform and not have to time getting these butterfly
Yes.
hover
Oh my
points right. And
gosh.
like,
Yes.
oh, I just want to finish this level and not be in the world being turned upside down on me. Like there were I had that feeling with every one of those like mechanical puzzles where I was like, I am actually like frustrated, uncomfortable as a player. And I don't know if that was, like they could have not had those challenges and like had a really delightful meditative experience for the players. But I am now that you've said that, I am wondering how intentional that is. If they were on purpose trying to make it so it's like actually we want you to be frustrated by this, um, like mechanically, because otherwise it would maybe be too contemplative and not enough viscera.
Yeah, I agree. I think yeah, and who knows, maybe even if it wasn't their intention, maybe it could be one of those like wink wink, like let's
Yeah,
say it is.
of course it was on
It's
purpose. We
definitely
wanted you to be
um
frustrated.
no, but I think you know, I agree there are other moments that I felt like we'll talk about the blue level depression,
Mhm,
and there's a moment in a section of that level in particular where I feel I hate it because I feel so claustrophobic, and like I don't fully breathe through that entire section because it becomes
mhm,
so ominous and just like pressing.
mm.
So I agree. I think they do intentionally put in moments where, as a player, you're not meant to feel super comfortable or super like in a flow state. Like maybe a little bit of frustration is
Not
the
in a
intent.
flow state.
Mhm.
That's a really good way to frame it. Yeah. Because there are moments where you're just bopping along, you're like, oh, I'm going to jump to that leaf and it's going to be great.
Yeah.
And it feels really good. And then there are moments where it's like, this feels fucking terrible and I don't like it.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think the first time, because for folks who maybe didn't listen, or just as a reminder, I this is only the second time I've played the game, so it feels very much like I'm coming back to sort of this faded memory of an
Mm,
experience, and but I do remember feeling at some points like, why is this so clunky the first time I played? And in playing the second time, I don't know if it's, who knows again if it's because we're reading into it because we like to overthink here, or or if it's more intentional. But this second playthrough, as I'm thinking more of like what this game is trying to say, and not just reacting to it, but being able to digest it a bit more, it does feel intentional, because there are those moments that feel really, really good. And so I'm like, they know how to make moments that feel just like
hmm
flowy and powerful and magical. And so
hmm
it feels much more intentional the second time around because of that.
Yeah, like one of the mechanical things in the red level is it's the first time that you get to actually like break through crumbling architecture.
Yes.
And that feels good and for me every time you do it. It's
Yep.
like you jump, you turn into this heavy block square and you crush through the cracked rock underneath you to get to the next section and it feels good. And like so I say that to say they didn't have to add the wind component at all to make the block experience mechanically useful. They
Hmm.
could have just like hid some of those cracky things and the puzzle would have been finding the cracky things and breaking through them. But they intentionally, I would assume,
Yeah.
made this more the frustrator being the wind in this particular
Hmm.
section of the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was really really fascinating.
Yeah.
um yeah.
Um, the last note I have just for um the red section in particular, and then we can move on maybe to green, which is like bargaining. But for me, the last note for red is thinking about the dress as representative of these ways that our protagonist is shielding herself from the world in quite very literal ways.
That's
Made
good.
Yeah, it made me think about like the ways, whether physically, like literally through our clothes, we can shield ourselves and show sort of what's happening on the inside, but also just sort of the mental shields that we put up, especially during these points in our life. um yeah.
Oh, that is very, very good. Man, yeah, because there's so often that like I used to be of the belief that when you feel physically sick, that you should dress to the nines because it tricked your body into not feeling sick.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the inverse of that, where it's like, hey, sometimes it's actually you need to do dress in a way that does mimic that internal need. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think of, especially when I was in like middle school, there was a hoodie that I had that was like, I didn't consciously do it, but this was the hoodie that I wore every time I was like feeling really down or frustrated. And it was
Mm.
like the comfort hoodie. Um, so I imagine, I thought of that when I saw this like transformation with the dress. I was like, oh my gosh, like it's not as, rock solid, but there's this element of like your clothes and your physicality being a part of like how you're showing and experiencing the world around you.
That's really good.
Yeah.
I do want to call it just two quick motifs that you get at the end
Hmm.
of this. The first is we mentioned this last time that like, oh, there's that turtle thing on the wall, and I was like, wait, hold on, that's actually in the red section. So I confirmed you do see this like turtle cave painting for the first time in the red
Hmm.
section. You can't really do much with it, but it's there. And so we're going to see that turtle motif throughout the rest of these sections, and I
Hmm.
definitely want to make sure that y'all hang on to that mental image.
Yep.
The other thing was to progress out of the red section. One of the last puzzles is this giant like wheel, like a wire wheel, if you will,
Yes.
significantly bigger than you as the character. And you have to kind of jump and turn into a block on parts of the wheel to get it to kind of lock into place. And that's
Hmm.
what kind of opens the path to the next section. And I call that out because like the circular element of constellations is, and like think of a star map, if you will, like if you ever
Hmm.
saw a star map with a big circle, it reminds me a lot of that. And I think that's another motif that we see a lot through the rest of the game.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. Um, that was also a section that I found really frustrating. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie. Um, so we then move into this really interesting section because I think this is the
Oh, I'm so
least.
sorry.
Oh,
There's one other thing we have to talk about.
yes.
The cute little rock guys. It's the first
Yes.
time we see any like living creature that's not the little flyby guys.
Yes, I'm glad you noted that because, yeah, I said, but we do finally see signs of rock life. So,
And it seems like somehow you are connected to it. Like something about
mhm,
you as a character is what's maybe inspiring the movement of these little rock guys.
yeah.
And I think that is something we're going to come back to and see a lot through the rest of the game as well.
Mhm. So in this next section, I think it's really interesting because I think of all the levels in this game, with maybe the exception of like the final one, this is the one that seems most blended in a weird
Mm,
way. We move into an area that's much more green, like green is added in.
mhm,
Um, but there's still a lot of red. Like especially we talked about the trees and how in the first stage they are just sort of black and barren. They don't have any leaves, they don't have any foliage. We start to move into a place where these trees are now colored in with red bark and sort of stems and branches, and their foliage is green. What I think, just in terms of, because the question this last week was thinking about like what are the things that we're trying to create metaphors or symbols, what are they representing, and so color here has very intentional use, and this idea of like anger perhaps still being at the root of a lot of this bargaining and this next stage that we're in, was one that immediately just kind of came to mind in a quite, quite literal fashion. But
yeah.
um, that was the first visual element that I really like grasped when I hopped in.
I hadn't really thought about that, but I think you're right too. Like, a lot of times bargaining is like financial, and in some countries, money is green. Like, I don't know, there could be
Yeah.
something there too, because it's like, well, why did they choose specific colors for some of these things? I think the red for anger makes a lot of sense. Like
Hmm.
colloquially, that it ties together nicely. I would be curious to hear how they decided on the color palette for each thing. Like, what came first? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the
Yeah.
design of the level or the color of that level.
Yeah, because I think when I was thinking about this too, I was very aware of like in Western culture, red is often associated with anger, but like in other cultures, that may not be the case.
Yeah, good
And
call.
so also, I was like, that's another element I was considering, as we're going through and doing a color analysis. The developers, I believe, are from Spain. So maybe like,
Mhm.
I don't know Spanish culture, but if there are specific colors that have different meanings, I may not pick up on that. So just as a highlight for an area that I might not be able to pinpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of small moments in this section
Hmm.
that are like really iconic for me. You meet this little like stone cutie that
Yeah.
follows you around, and you kind of feed him apples and he helps you solve through some of the puzzles.
Hmm.
Um, you uncover what I have always found to be one of the most frustrating mechanical elements of the game, which are red butterflies that help you like jump more.
Hmm.
And it just does not feel good to me. Like anytime I'm trying to get the timing right, it's like, wait, but I've already double jumped. So can I jump again? Or I've jumped once to get to the red butterflies. Does that mean I can double jump after? Like
Hmm.
whatever the rule is, my brain can't remember
Hmm.
it. And so I mess it up throughout the whole game. I think another thing to call out here is like this entire greenscape is
Hmm.
below the level of the desert.
Yes.
So, like, one of the things I'll do in the Discord is I have in the art book a huge spread that shows kind of all of the levels fitting together into one picture, and it's gorgeous
Mm-hmm.
to look at. But there's a real element of descent versus ascent here, and at this point, like we're still on the descent side of
Yep.
things. Like we're coming down into this greenscape. Um, I was curious too about the ability of the stone cutie
Hmm.
to change the environment.
Hmm.
And I've been thinking about this a lot, which is like, what makes the environment change? Like as you're moving through, like there are different things that will. The stone cutie is somehow able to change the root system around you.
Mhm.
Like the little dude will move around, do something, and the roots will actually move and change, which
Right.
open new pathways for you. I was wondering if you, as you were playing through, had any theories about like the change in the landscape or the environment, and like anything that might have sparked for you for like what's actually going on here, like why is this environment changing?
Well, and I don't know if it's because I kind of knew like the title of that achievement that you can get before I hopped in, but for
Mm.
me it was just again this very physical representation of that element of bargaining, of navigating and trying to like make something sort of fit or work within, this new framework or this new way that the world has changed around you. And so I think for me it became just a physical representation of that mental sort of reconstruction and pathway building that you do. I don't know. What
That
what
is
are
so
some of your
good.
thoughts around that?
Well, I think the way you unlock the statue achievement in this
Mhm.
is you try to sing. And
Yes.
whenever you try to sing in the game, it locks your character. Like you try to sing, you take a breath in, you can't really get any sound out, and then
Yep.
you can't move for a second.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you get answers necessarily in this part of the chapter. I love this take of like, well, through bargaining, you move things and change things. I think that is a fantastic take. But like, I wonder if there's some. We talked last time
Mhm.
about how those little flying creatures in the background kind of look like small, unevolved versions of Gris,
Mhm.
flying around. And one of the things that I was noticing with this section is like, oh, well, this little stone cutie, like big square head, I can turn into a square block. Is
Mhm.
this another kind of evolutionary step towards becoming a Gris, if you will? And so I was
Yeah.
just wondering about like the ability for the living creatures in this world to change the shape of this world just through like who they are at any
Mhm.
given point in their evolution. And it's something that I definitely will come back to as we get to all the chapters in this game. So I don't have any answers, but at this point, but I have a lot of questions.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, and this kind of skips ahead to the final stage of acceptance, but there's this, and you're the philosopher. So actually, you may know this a little bit better than I. But I remember learning a long time ago about Plato and this idea of the divided line and the realm of like, um, sort of the realm of perception versus like the intelligible realm that's more physical, and then the realm
Yeah.
of perception
The
which is a little bit,
formative realm.
yeah, which is like a little bit more ideological.
Yeah.
And so I feel like at this point we are in an abstraction of the physical world, and this idea of Gris having all of these entities around her that are perhaps like different manifestations of herself. So like, um the little
Wow.
rock buddies are, because she can turn into a rock. There's sort of representative or like echoes of her. The
Oh.
little sprouted rock buddies that you see in bargaining, being
Uh-huh.
kind of this, again, this extension of her. And later on, as we move into sort of even the end of this level, when we start to see the songbird,
The
that is,
antagonist.
yeah, the antagonist, but also I deeply tied to Gris and her being. And so I
Hmm.
kept coming back to this idea of this being a much more, um, this being an abstracted world, and this all kind of maybe happening and representing her versus just like literally being another being. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's so legit. And honestly, like the songbird shows up as this kind of inky, formless manifestation that
Hmm.
chooses the form of this bird that screams
Yes.
at you. And you have to kind of like use a combination of your block skill and your jumping into the butterfly skill to like progress.
Hmm.
And this creature, this inky manifestation, will follow you throughout the rest of this game. And I thought again, one of my all-time favorite antagonists. Like I have a tattoo of it on my body, in eel form, which we'll meet later. I just think it's so brilliant. Last thing I'm going to call out here for me in this section
Hmm.
is, for anyone that really likes this art style, I would strongly encourage you to check out John Clausen, who
Hmm.
is a children's book illustrator, but also does just like, he has a lot of artwork just online that you can find. And his work, the nature of it, like this, the scenery reminds me so much of like a less color saturated version of the Gris world. And
Hmm.
so if you're interested in that, would check out John Clausen, Jonklauson. Um, very much enjoy his stuff.
Cool. Um, I'm just making sure. Actually, could you type that into the show notes just so I don't
Yeah,
forget to
totally.
include that in the notes there because it's not in there yet. And I will absolutely forget otherwise.
I have like John Clausen 8 exclamation points next to
Yeah.
my in my notes here and forgot to put anything
No,
for the
that's a
notes.
great shout.
That's
I
right.
totally agree. Yeah, the last thing for this area that I wanted to highlight is the fact that we meet the bird, and this representation of Gris. And what I think is really interesting is that when you first meet the bird, there is a split second where there's this moment of like more curiosity and less, there isn't like a fear or a harm element to it. It's like this is a songbird, it's like really cute. And then that's when the screaming and sort
Mm,
of this push and resistance to you moving forward and ascending happens.
yeah.
I also think it's just really interesting symbolically that this first iteration of the darkness that you see is of a bird, which is birds are known for their voices, for singing, and like the actual voice of this
Oh,
bird is not one that's a normal bird's beautiful song, but of like this really grating and kind of horrifying scream. And so I think
that's
again,
brilliant.
yeah, I don't know. It felt very like on the nose to me, but I don't know. I was just like, I think it's just so powerful. It's okay that it's
It
kind
was
of on the
not on
nose.
my nose.
Oh. um but yeah, I think this idea of like we know that Gris has lost her voice, she can't sing, and this like
Mm,
shadow bird version of herself is coming up to her and just like shrieking. And I thought just that feeling, that imagery is just so powerful and so good. Honestly, like that's the part of the game which it continues, I started getting like choked up there. Which
yeah.
that bodes well for the rest of the game. um but yeah, you have this confrontation with the bird, and what happens, I think, is you get to the hand is instead of turning, I guess, even more of a blend of colors, we get a really beautiful but deep blue that everything changes into.
Yes.
And we have now entered the stage that, if you get the achievement, is titled Depression.
I feel like they have very well captured some of the emotions, the real life emotions of
Hmm.
depression in the physical environment of this world. I think you immediately land down.
Yep.
One of the things that I wrote was it's the first time in the game where I felt really aimless. Like I could not tell as I was moving if I was at all going in the right direction, if I should be going up or down or left or right, because you're swimming, so like you
Hmm.
have more freedom of movement. And again, with like the depression side of this, is like wow, like if it would felt really clear where you're supposed to do, I don't know that I would have felt like this matched depression, but the idea that it feels aimless and that you're not really sure, at least in the beginning, where you're supposed to go, I think is just one more way they've kind of reinforced that idea through the experience.
I completely agree. I think we see this in the sound design as well. The sounds also become a bit more subdued and muted. We don't have like the sort of the more grand or even more aggressive punchy
Mm.
orchestrations that we've had before in the previous levels. Um I love that there's sort of an interesting calm to it as well. And it's
Mm.
not necessarily unpleasant, but there is this feeling of just like, what's the word, like stasis or limbo, where you're just kind of like suspended in some ways. And I thought that was really, really interesting. And they're starting to play with luminescence in the darkness, which just is an aesthetic set. Like I love luminescence in games. Like anytime
Mm.
there's a level that's dark with like glowy bits, I'm just like,
Mm.
I'm there. um but what I thought most interesting, was the fact that temperature becomes a thing in this level, and it's not really
Oh.
in any of the others. As you descend, you move from more watery areas into places where there are more ice crystals, and your new mechanic is that you can freeze yourself and almost remove yourself from that frozen version of your body to, jump up to new levels, use yourself as a
Mm,
platform. I thought that was really, really interesting. Again, the visceral element of temperature is brought into this in a way that I was not expecting. What
that
are some of
is
your thoughts?
fascinating. Yeah, I will say that that crystal puzzle was
Hmm.
one of the ones that I get stuck on every time I play this game because I forget how to solve it, and it got me again. It got me again. It's such a simple thing, and yet for some reason, it's like I approach this puzzle section and I just can't figure it out. I think the timeliness aspect of it is really interesting,
Hmm.
especially as we get to the next level where it's like you unlock light. And when light is there, you can access certain parts of the map. And when it's gone, like when your timer runs out, you can't.
Hmm.
So I think they're kind of prepping us for the timeliness that they're going to be pushing us forward to. I had not thought about the temperature before. That is a really interesting perspective. Um, the thing that stands out to me about this section is we finally meet our turtle boy.
Yeah.
A bunch of the stars that you've been collecting explode out from you and
Hmm.
kind of power this turtle. The turtle turns on because of the stars that you've been collecting. And last week, Jenna, you talked about or last time you talked about how maybe the stars that you collect to unlock parts of the level kind of represent how you need things that are outside of yourself
Hmm.
to move forward sometimes. And so I was like, oh, this turtle seems to be like one of the few like sentient things that I don't control really.
Hmm.
And I'm gonna like fast forward us through like a little section here because like you unlock this turtle, you float down, you can he carries you, like you essentially are like riding the turtle down to the next section of the level. Here you can also access the depression statue, which uh, was one of the first times that the statue's eyes are kind of like open, which I thought
Hmm.
was interesting. And then you meet the next iteration of your antagonist, which is this really terrifying eel. Eels always freak me out, and this one got me again. Um, and what I loved about this is you can survive the eel, you unlock the yellow, the eel chases you, and it is so intense. And he
Hmm.
breaks off into two eels, and that to those two eels break into like a million eels that are following you around, and it looks like you are about to get consumed by this big eel that's chasing you. And all of a sudden, our turtle boy comes through, snags you up, and floats you away, and you have no control. You cannot move. Even the first time that the turtle carries you, you can move a little bit within his shell. I was kind of testing this out. You can move a bit,
Hmm.
but the turtle's still kind of the force that's moving you forward. In this last part, where like you are getting consumed by this inky presence, uh, you cannot control yourself at all. You are completely reliant on the help of this external force to save you and to move you forward. And I
Hmm.
thought that was absolutely incredible. Like what a true manifestation of how we need outside help to move out of that depression phase sometimes. I just thought, I don't know. And who knows how intentional any of this stuff is from the designers, but for me, it really was a poignant moment.
Yeah. Um, I know we're also, just because again we have the hard stop, so I want to keep us moving. But the only thing I'll add then to that is that scene, especially when the turtle bursts sort of through and out of the eel. That's like basically when I just like the waterworks are just going, like there's no stopping it. The culmination between the artistry of the visual art, the music, like swelling at that moment, like all of the feelings. You feel the openness of this, like going from the super claustrophobic area, the tenseness of the chase into finally escaping is just like one of the biggest moments of release in the game. Um, It's awesome.
Mm,
It's just one of the most beautiful experiences.
yeah.
And as you move into this final stage, you'll later learn if you get the statue, it's called acceptance. And what I love most about this is we move from having the ruins, which have been the backdrop of the entire game, essentially. Uh, in depression, they have started to become a bit more translucent, but in
Hmm.
acceptance, they are truly like they look like it's glass. They look like a glass
Hmm.
beautiful translucent sculpture in the sky, and the color that is brought in is, yeah, like you said earlier, yellow.
Yeah.
But it's not a blended like yellow blending in with the previous colors like in between bargaining and anger, but it's like truly the world is colorful again,
Yeah.
which is pretty incredible. What I think is really interesting about this stage and super just what a great choice. When you start acceptance, the stage is silent. There's no music at the very beginning
Oh,
of it.
you're
And that
right.
choice of having no music um, at the start gave me chills, honestly.
Mm. You hear like every step. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I hadn't even noticed that. And you're
Yeah.
right. Like that really adds to the atmosphere.
Hmm.
Wow.
When the song does come in, it's titled Firmament. That's the track name. And I looked up because I was like, I don't know what firmament means. I like literally, it's a word that I don't know. And basically, firmament means essentially a tangible representation of heaven. And
Mm,
so, literally, you are in this sort of heavenly garden that Gris finally has escaped for now, at least this
mm.
the darkness and the underwater sort of confines of the last level. Um,
Ugh, it's so beautiful.
yeah, I think what's also really apparent about this area compared to the underwater caverns of the previous level, there is water in this, but it's filled with life. It's like an aquarium almost. You
Hmm.
have fish that
Hmm.
are like there's fish in the depression level, but I think there's this like again the translucent and sort of the open aquarium feel like they're just kind of out in the air versus in the caverns, so there's definitely just this feeling of life and birds are singing in this, which is also another notable detail.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And the first time it is also where you unlock your ability to sing, and like the first time you
Hmm.
see like those pops of magenta. Ah, it's absolutely stunning. Mechanically, the thing that I think is really interesting here is that like half of the world is right side up and half of it is upside down, and you have to navigate through it. And I
Hmm.
thought that was a really interesting point of acceptance is like you have to manage through as your world is being turned upside down and learn how to navigate like that
Hmm.
until eventually you're able to kind of turn your world right side up in total. And I
Hmm.
thought that was like a really beautiful kind of representation for what acceptance can feel like. A couple of things that stood out to me playing through this time that I hadn't really noticed before is that it is nighttime when
Hmm.
you get to this part of the game. And it feels kind of like morning or daytime at the very beginning. And which made me think like, is this all happening in the span of like one solar day, which
Hmm.
felt really impactful or meaningful to me in the moment. Some of the other things that I notice is like we've been talking about this, but I'll stop hiding my cards now. You sing the world into life.
Yep.
You sing and boxes appear. You sing and flowers bloom. You move and things change.
Hmm.
And so I kind of got this idea in my head that you are kind of a god in this world, that like as things evolve, they get to move things and adjust things until they get to like your evolved state that Gris is in now, that you have more agency in changing the world around you.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, we have to talk about like the big dramatic conclusion where our this inky presence continues following you. It's back into bird mode now. It's following you around until eventually it takes your form. It takes your face with like the gris hair, the blue hair, and then starts to swallow you at the same time that you are trying to sing to reconstitute the statue of this woman, the woman that
Hmm.
we presume kind of broke apart and you fell from at the
Mm.
beginning of the
Hmm.
game. Um, and it was beautiful to me watching that like moment to moment cutscene where you're singing and you're watching the cracks start to slowly come together while you're getting consumed until you get like this resonance where the statue is kind of singing along back to you and along with you. So I think there's something there about like the memory of the people that we lose and how that can be something that can carry you through in some of our darkest moments. And you know, obviously, like you make it through, you form a big constellation, and it lights up the world, and like we're back to our title Gris screen. But that's just like what happens, and I just got to say, for me, emotionally, it was like such a beautiful moment.
Hmm.
And like it always is. This is like third or fourth time playing through this, but what were some of your feelings as you were playing through this ending?
Um, so I wanted to go back a little bit into sort of
Yeah.
that acceptance level because I think that's where that idea of like the Plato's divine line really came into because throughout
Mm,
the entire game there is sort of this horizon line that we're working with. But in this specific level, there's a moment when Gris is singing and you like see the line very clearly and the circles, and so this idea and also the mechanic you were talking about of like the reflections. I
mm,
think this idea of the world that we see versus the world that is a bit more abstracted, I think there's this like there's something there that we'll probably have more time to unpack when we do our monthly hangout
mm,
at the end of the month. um but I think as in terms of feelings about the ending, I think um one of the things that really stuck with me is the idea of how you may think you may get to a point in grieving where you feel like you have made it. You're like, oh, I'm not every day crying. I think I'm done grieving. And something totally knocks you kind of right back. And visually, this happens where she is in the constellation, almost sort of ascending into the skies. And we get knocked back into the color palette of denial all the way
mm-hmm,
back and then to
mm-hmm.
black. And so,
Oh.
this idea of grief not being as linear as we think, or the fact that there are times when we will get sucked back in. I liken it to an ocean wave, whereas sometimes there are waves that you can like handle, but sometimes they're like those sneaky waves that just like catch you and pull you under. But that second time that we get pulled under, Gris does have her voice and is able, like you said, to use her voice, and it's this element of resilience that I feel like I didn't quite grasp the first time I played, but playing it the
Mm,
second time, I think I've got that sense of resilience in the ending, which made me feel just even more impressed with this game. That even through grief, you can come back and continue to get stronger. And even if you kind of fall back into a level, in how you feel about what's happening, you increasingly sort of gain those points where maybe you don't fall back as far, or you don't have to go through the entire journey again. You can start piecing things together. um
mm.
yeah, just super powerful ending. Cried the whole time.
Yes. We
Yeah,
did it, everybody.
we
We got
did
Jenny
it.
to cry for the first time ever playing a
Yeah,
game.
I never cry, so this is just a shocker, honestly.
I do want to just like say, there is a secret ending to this game that I did not know exists.
Hmm.
And if you collect all the mementos and you go back to like the last stage, there's a little area that you can go to that unlocks a memory. And you get to actually see Gris hanging out as a younger person, younger being, presumably with the person that she lost. And I'm not really going to say much more about it than that. It is absolutely worth to hop on YouTube and just type in Gris secret ending and watch it. I thought it was just it was really beautiful. It doesn't have the same kind of animation style. It feels like you're witnessing more of like the chops of a memory, but
Mm,
it was just like a really beautiful moment.
yeah. So, if you're interested, definitely go check that out. Just to close out this episode, I want to say that if you're interested in hanging out, digging even deeper into some of what we talked about today, not just with me and Joel, but the rest of the community, our monthly hangout is going to be on March 30th, Saturday, March 30th at 3 p.m. Pacific. You can come in, hang out. We have folks who like to come in and just listen. We, of course, would love if you came in and were ready to share at least a few thoughts in the chat about what you were experiencing, how you felt about the game. But everyone's welcome to just enjoy just hanging out with other people. sometimes you just want to be in the presence of other folks. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Love it. Thanks so much for joining as we talked about one of my favorite games of the ever this month. Really appreciate all of your all's insight and sharing in the comments. I guess what I'm just going to say this month is if you find yourself at the end of your rope, look for your turtles. Look for those constellations and stars, people that can bring you forward.
Nice.
Thanks so much.
See y'all next time.
Bye.